Directed by Taika Waititi, 2019's Jojo Rabbit is an adaptation of the 2008 book Caging Skies. It tells the story of a 10-year-old German boy towards the end of the Second World War, grappling with his self-identification as a Nazi and the reality that his mother is hiding a Jewish girl in their house.
Hi.
As always, this video will have plenty of spoilers. I certainly can't talk about the movie without spoiling things, so if you care, go watch Jojo Rabbit before coming back to me. Conflict is the driving force of a narrative. Conflict is what stands in the way of a protagonist on their journey through a story. Without conflict, you don't have tension, you don't have drama, you don't have the very core of what makes a narrative compelling to an audience. There might be some esoteric narrative art out there that exists without conflict, but it's unknown to me. Conflict is what makes Frodo's journey to Mount Doom compelling. Conflict is what makes Joker such a compelling antagonist to Batman. We often describe conflict in terms like character versus society. Think A Handmaid's Tale. Character versus nature, think Into the Wild. Character versus character, like The Dark Knight. Character versus technology, like in The Matrix. In reality, these categories are often blended. For instance, in Terminator 2, the main story is thematically humanity's fight for survival against the machines. The T-1000 acts as a personification, a proxy of the greater war against the machines. But the T-1000 is the primary antagonist of the protagonist with whom they directly fight. It fills both character versus character while also thematically fitting with the umbrella of character versus technology. But all of these conflicts are external. They are character versus an outside force pushing back against their goal in some form or another. But there's another kind of conflict, an internal one. Character versus self is when the main point of conflict for the protagonist is the protagonists themselves. This is the story of Jojo Rabbit.
It's time for Jojo to show those stick insects who is the real cowardly rabbit.
I'm sorry, what are you talking about?
The film is, at its core, a film about the Nazis, but more specifically, a Nazi. The Nazi that Jojo believes himself to be.
I am born of Aryan ancestry. My blood is the color of a pure red rose.
Spurred on by his imaginary friend Hitler.
How's it all going with that Jew thing upstairs?
Well, she doesn't want to talk to me.
Well, you are a Nazi.
He's just a 10-year-old boy who's been fed abhorrent propaganda his whole life, which has led him to idolize Hitler and hate Jews. The film is largely told from Jojo's perspective, but the few times it deviates from his path are scenes between Rosie and Elsa.
I know he's in there somewhere. The little boy who loves to play and runs to you because he's scared of thunder, thinks you invented chocolate cake. In the end, that's all you have. Hope. That your only remaining child is not just another ghost.
These scenes help us sympathize with Jojo despite his abhorrent beliefs because Rosie is unequivocally on the side of right, fighting the Nazis and helping Elsa. Rosie is the voice that tells us that Jojo is a soul worth saving from Nazism. A few years back, I visited the National World War II Museum in New Orleans. There happened to be an exhibit on Nazi propaganda, and I was struck by just how much of it was targeted at children. From anti-Semitic children's books to board games, the Hitler Youth was radicalized with propaganda that both glorified subservience to Hitler while painting horrific anti-Semitic caricatures of Jews.
Start telling me about your kind.
Obviously, we are demons who love money, right?
Obviously. Everyone knows that.
So you're gonna get out there and you're gonna have a great time, okay?
Okay.
That's the spirit, okay. Heil me, man.
Heil Hitler.
I had written most of this script before the events of January 6, 2021 here in the United States, but in the light of the riot at the Capitol fed by the lies and disinformation from now former President Trump and his media allies, I wanted to address propaganda more broadly. While the Nazis made a concerted effort to target propaganda at children, they were not lacking in propaganda targeting adults, and it worked. Many Germans were radicalized by the disinformation of the Reich. After World War II, the Allied occupation underwent an extensive denazification process in an effort to de-radicalize the Germans who had been indoctrinated by over a decade of Nazi propaganda. As part of this effort of de-radicalization and democratization, the Allied forces confiscated and destroyed Nazi literature, newspapers, films, and other various pieces of Nazi propaganda. Now here in the United States, the First Amendment protects speech. It protects my right to say that the Nazis' views are abhorrent as much as it protects a Nazi's right to express their abhorrent views. Was it right for the Allied forces to destroy Nazi propaganda in an effort to aid denazification of the German population? It almost certainly would have been a violation of the First Amendment, but when faced with unimaginable Nazi indoctrination, arguably limiting Nazi speech was essential to helping Germany recover from the war. So how do we recover? How do we undo the radicalization of a segment of population who's been fed nothing but lies and misinformation when their only sources of information is an echo chamber of those lies and disinformation? How can we stop the spread of lies without criminalizing it? How, within the framework of the Constitution, and more specifically the First Amendment, can we undo the damage of misinformation and help to de-radicalize those who have been victimized by it? We can't outlaw lies. We can't outlaw propaganda. The First Amendment allows me to say anything I want here on Screen Cheatum. But it also allows YouTube to take down any video I post for whatever reason they want. There's an explicit agreement between YouTube and myself by way of their terms of service in which I've agreed to not post anything they consider objectionable. Look, I'm not expecting these mega social media corporations to be benevolent in their actions to what I consider the best interest of society, nor do I think it's realistic that every platform will be able to regulate misinformation and lies from spreading whole cloth. But a step like banning Trump from Twitter only seemed drastic because Twitter had allowed him to abuse their terms of service for years without any repercussions. Lies have consequences, and we saw that on January 6th. The rest of us looked on in horror as we watched our fellow countrymen descend on the citadel of our republic, rejecting the very democracy it represents. Where do we go from here? How do we recover? Many on the right called for unity in the aftermath of the siege, but how can you unify without reconciliation and acknowledgement of the lies and propaganda that led the horde from the ellipse to the Capitol in the first place? How can we come together as a nation when half of the political leaders refuse to acknowledge their responsibility in fomenting the radicalization in the crowd that day? Lies have consequences, and we'll never overcome them as long as lies are given the same platform as truth. Jojo is a child who's been fully indoctrinated by the propaganda of Hitler. He believes all the lies he's been told. He believes himself to be a superior race. He believes the Jews are the root of all evil. He believes himself to be a Nazi.
You're not a Nazi.
I'm massively into swastikas, so I think that's a pretty good sign right there.
You're not a Nazi, Jojo. You're a 10-year-old kid who likes swastikas and likes dressing up in a funny uniform and wants to be part of a club. But you are not one of them.
The film makes a point very early on via Captain Klenzendorf to set up the state of the war. It's clear from his description that the war is nearing its end and the Germans are going to lose.
And even though it would appear our country's on the back foot and there really isn't much hope in us winning this war, apparently we're doing just fine.
Of course, this is an unthinkable outcome for Jojo, but for the audience who knows the Allies were ultimately victorious, this moment is crucial for our understanding of the greater state of where the war is at. It gives us the knowledge at the start of the film that the Nazis will soon be defeated, and that no matter what happens, we know that the end of the war is within reach. It allows us to have hope for Elsa, the young Jewish woman hiding in Jojo's house, and it's what makes the death of Rosie all the more tragic. Foreshadowing, at its most basic level, is a narrative hint at plot elements that will come later in a story. Something to tease the audience with, or prepare them for the events that are yet to come. In Jojo Rabbit, this comes with the gutting realization of the fate of Rosie. Taika Waititi tells us very early that Rosie will not survive the war, and he does it all without words. Early in the film, we're introduced to the gallows in the town square, a stark reminder that while this film is on its surface a comedy, the world the characters inhabit is led by a brutal, unforgiving, authoritarian regime who will not hesitate to kill anyone.
What do they do?
What they could.
The shots often frame Jojo with Rosie's feet around his shoulder level, standing high above, with her distinctive shoes featuring prominently to the audience. Waititi wants us to know these shoes and recognize this shot.
Well, I won't dance. Dancing's for people who don't have a job.
Dancing's for people who are free.
Foreshadowing well is an art. You want to indicate that something will happen without making it obvious. Framing the shots this way is a beautiful work of foreshadowing. There's no words or context in the shots that would lead you to believe that it will end the way it does, just the visual and the knowledge imparted by the earlier shot of the gallows to tell you that the stakes are as high as possible.
I'm sorry about Rosie. She was a good person. An actual good person. Okay?
Rosie's death is tragic. Aside from hiding the Jewish friend of her late daughter, we're told two things about Jojo's mother: that she's well regarded in the town and she's actively assisting the resistance. She is an optimist in the face of abject horror, and she longs for the kind of boy that Jojo used to be before he was indoctrinated by Nazi propaganda. Her death is a tragedy because she is a paragon of virtue. But it's also a tragedy because she doesn't get to see Jojo shake himself of the indoctrination by the end of the film. She never gets to see her little boy again. The tragedy of her death, however, might have been just the catalyst that Jojo needed to rid himself of Nazism for good. A key point about her death is that it's not the fault of any action that Jojo takes, but a result of Rosie's own agency with the resistance and a part of her fight against the Nazi regime. One of my favorite moments in the film is when the Gestapo shows up and Jojo is forced to Heil Hitler each and every one of them.
May we come?
And with every single one, he realizes the weight and pressure of the situation that he's in, where if he says it the wrong way and invites the wrong suspicion, he can get himself and Elsa and everyone he cares about killed. It's such a great juxtaposition to the beginning of the film when he peps himself up with a series of increasingly energetic and enthusiastic Heil Hitlers before running out to start his Nazi youth event. This is a crucial moment for Jojo as he begins to recognize the terror of the regime he once idolized.
Heil Hitler. Heil Hitler.
In perhaps his darkest moment of the film, Jojo has to make a choice on whether or not to tell Elsa that the war is over and that Germany has lost. He's lost his sister. The leader he once thought unimpeachable has been defeated and killed his mother in the process. Elsa is the only thing he knows. Jojo has a choice. He can become the Nazi he thought he was and keep Elsa prisoner indefinitely, or he can tell her the truth, that the Allies have won and that she is free. And in the process, he will lose everyone and everything he's known.
Jojo, who won the war?
We did. Germany won the war. I'm sorry.
This is also where the film greatly deviates from the book upon which it is based, but this is screen Cheatum and not page Cheatum. This is a story about Jojo, but the Jojo we've known is not the protagonist of the story.
Heil me? Come on, for old time's sake. Heil me, little man.
No.
Heil me.
No.
A little heil, just a little heil, please.
Fuck off, Hitler.
It's not until the end of the film, when he boots imaginary Hitler out of his bedroom window and out of his life, that we finally get to meet the protagonist of Jojo Rabbit, the Jojo that Rosie desired him to be.
Dancing's for people who are free.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you want updates on upcoming videos or just my general thoughts, Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at ScreenCheatum. Then in the end, we'll say those magic YouTube words. Please like and subscribe.